never imagined I'd be the kind of guy sharing a story like this. You know the type, the one whose wife turns out to be unfaithful, whose life spirals down over a few random text messages. Yet, here I am, drink in hand, trying to wrap my head around it all and, maybe, just maybe, figure out what's next. It was just another average evening, right? Maya and I had reached that stage in our marriage where we felt more like housemates than partners. Nothing dramatic, just a sense of distance. I figured it was just a phase. Life gets hectic, work, bills, daily routines. I thought we were simply navigating one of those rough patches that people often mention. Then I stumbled upon the messages. I swear I wasn't snooping. At least that's the story I tell myself. Her phone lay there, buzzing with notifications while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but something inside nudged me to take a look. And that's when I saw them. Dozens of messages exchanged with some jerk from her office, filled with lines like, "I can't stop thinking about you," and "Last night was incredible." My heart sank like a stone. My hands trembled as I scrolled through those texts. It was intimate stuff, words she used to say to me back when everything felt right between us. When she finally emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, she acted as if nothing was amiss. I stood there, her phone clutched in my hand, my heart racing. The moment she caught sight of my expression, she froze, and before she could utter a word, I tossed her phone onto the bed. "Who the hell is he?" I demanded, my voice low but edged with anger. Initially, she pretended not to understand what I was asking. Classic gaslighting. But when I refused to let it go, she shifted into defense mode. "It only happened once," she said, her tone soft, laced with feigned remorse. "Bullshit," I shot back. "Once? Is that all it takes to destroy our marriage?" She sank onto the bed, shoulders drooping, like she was some kind of victim. "I never wanted to hurt you, Derek," she whispered, as if that somehow made things better. I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in around me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about our relationship, felt like a complete facade. The worst part? She wasn't even fighting for us. She just sat there, dishing out half-hearted apologies that only fueled my anger. When I pressed her for answers, how long, how often, why, she responded with vague excuses, as if withholding the details would somehow ease the blow. But it didn't. If anything, it deepened my despair. "You want me to be honest?" she finally replied, crossing her arms like she was the one being interrogated. "I needed someone, Derek. You weren't there for me." That stung like a punch to the gut. Sure, I hadn't been a perfect husband, but I was still present, trying my best. I hadn't checked out or betrayed her behind her back. After what felt like an eternity of heavy silence, she finally suggested, "Maybe we should try therapy. I don't want to lose everything over this." I was too numb to argue. Therapy? Sure, why not? Maybe a professional could untangle this mess because I sure as hell couldn't. So I agreed, even though every part of me loathed the thought of sitting in some stranger's office, airing our dirty laundry. That night I needed to clear my head, so I met up with Landon. He had been through his own hell, divorce, custody battles, the whole nightmare. If anyone could help me make sense of this chaos, it was him. When we met at a downtown bar, the first thing Landon did upon seeing my face was order 2 shots. I must have looked like a wreck because he didn't even ask what happened. After we knocked back the shots, I laid it all out for him, the messages, the confrontation, the pathetic excuses. Landon listened intently, nodding like he understood exactly what I was going through. "Look, man," he said, leaning in closer. "I tried to save my marriage, too. Thought therapy would fix everything. But some relationships, they're not worth saving." His words hit hard, planting a seed of doubt that took root immediately. What if he was right? What if Maya and I were already too far gone? We talked for hours, sifting through everything, from the cherished memories I had with Maya to the painful truth of her betrayal. Landon didn't sugarcoat a thing. He warned me about what was ahead: the late-night arguments, the uncomfortable therapy sessions, the constant second-guessing. "Whatever you do, Derek," he advised, "don't let her convince you it's your fault. You didn't cheat. She did. I left that bar with my mind racing in 100 different directions. I still didn't know if therapy would help, but one thing was clear. I couldn't just pretend this had never happened. The next couple of days, Maya and I danced around each other, sidestepping real conversations. It felt like we were living in a fragile bubble, just waiting for it to burst. Eventually, we found a therapist, Dr. Tara Wells. She seemed competent and professional, the kind of person who might be able to sort through the mess we were in. Our first session with Tara was intense. I poured my heart out. How betrayed I felt, how humiliated I was. Maya sat there, looking more irritated than guilty, as if this whole situation was merely an inconvenience for her. I needed emotional support, she said at one point, as if that excuse could somehow justify her actions. I could feel my anger boiling over, but Tara stepped in before things escalated. She had a calm, measured way of speaking that was direct yet unsettling, as if she could see right through us. I really didn't want to be there, yet I couldn't ignore that Tara's presence shifted the dynamic in the room. Maybe it was the way she listened intently or how her gaze seemed to linger just a beat too long. Whatever it was, I was definitely aware of it. Once the session wrapped up, Maya suggested we grab a bite to eat together. "We need to make an effort, Derek," she said, flashing a hopeful smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I went along with it, but my heart wasn't in it. Something fundamental had changed between us, and I was uncertain if we could ever return to what we once were. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, listening to her steady breathing, I was struck by one undeniable truth. This was just the beginning. Deep down, I wasn't even sure I wanted to repair things. The bubble we'd created had burst. Now, I just needed to figure out what came next. The first session with Dr. Tara Wells was every bit as awkward and draining as I had anticipated. I perched stiffly on the couch, Maya beside me, leaving just enough space between us to highlight the rift that had grown in our relationship. It felt as though we were two strangers forced together in a room to fix a life neither of us knew how to mend. Tara sat across from us, legs crossed, a notebook resting on her knee. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her mid-30s, and her eyes sparkled with a sharp intelligence. It was the kind of gaze that made you feel exposed, as if she could see right through the facade, whether you were ready to confront it or not. "So, Derek," she began, her voice smooth and steady, "why don't you start by sharing how you've been feeling about everything?" I took a deep breath, already regretting my decision to come. "How I've been feeling," I echoed, running a hand over my face. "I feel utterly humiliated, betrayed, like the person I trusted most decided I just wasn't enough." My voice wavered, and I hated how raw it sounded, but I pushed through. "She lied to me. For months, it seems. I found out through her phone, not from her. What am I supposed to do with that?" I felt Maya shift beside me, like she was preparing her defense. Sure enough, she jumped in. "I didn't intend for it to happen, Derek." You didn't intend for it to happen?" I interrupted, anger bubbling to the surface. "What? Did you just stumble into his bed?" Maya sighed dramatically, as if I was being unreasonable. "I needed someone. Okay? You've been distant for months, maybe even years. I felt alone, even when we were together. And sleeping with someone else was your answer?" I shot back. "Brilliant move." Tara raised her hand slightly, signaling us to take a breather. "I understand this is painful for both of you, but we need to keep this conversation productive." She glanced at Maya, then back at me. "Let's try to understand each other's viewpoints. Maya, you mentioned feeling emotionally unsupported. Derek, how does that resonate with you?" I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to explode. I bust my ass to provide for us, and she tells me I wasn't emotionally available. That's a slap in the face. I didn't cheat. I didn't throw our marriage away. She did. Maya inhaled sharply, crossing her arms defensively. "You don't understand. You never listened to me, Derek. You never have." Tara intervened once more, her tone calm yet assertive. "Maya, let's try to avoid casting all the blame. I can see both of you are in considerable pain right now." "Pain?" I wanted to laugh. Maya sat there, looking like some kind of martyr, pretending she hadn't just dropped a bomb on my life. And Tara, well, she was good at her job, that much was clear. She had a knack for making you feel heard, even if you didn't want to share. As much as I despised being there, I found myself watching Tara closely. She radiated a quiet confidence, an aura of control. The way her eyes met mine felt like she could read every suppressed thought swirling in my head. There was something magnetic about her, catching me off guard. It wasn't just her looks, though she was undeniably attractive. It was her ability to understand my turmoil, even in that first session. After we left the office, Maya was in full damage control mode. "We're doing the right thing," she insisted, squeezing my arm as if that would magically fix everything. I merely grunted in response, my thoughts still mired in frustration and resentment. The second session came around faster than I'd expected. I entered Tara's office, still simmering with anger. But this time, something felt different. Maybe it was Maya's anxious energy. She was probably bracing herself for another round of interrogation. Or maybe it was Tara. As the session unfolded, I noticed that Tara engaged with me more directly. She asked questions that Maya had never thought to ask. About my frustrations, my hopes, even my regrets. It felt oddly refreshing, as if someone finally saw me rather than the failures I supposedly represented to Maya. At one point, I opened up about my friendship with Landon and how his divorce had left him jaded. He told me some relationships aren't worth saving, I admitted. And honestly, I think I might agree with him. Maya shot me a glare that felt like a slap, but Tara nodded thoughtfully, as if she completely understood my perspective. "It's normal to feel conflicted," she said. "You've been deeply hurt. The question now is, do you believe this relationship can still bring you happiness?" It was a profound question, one I didn't have a clear answer for. After the session, something unexpected occurred. Maya, in her usual careless fashion, left her phone on Tara's desk. She realized it halfway down the hallway and turned back to grab it. But not before I did. I knew it was wrong, but at this point, I was already knee-deep in betrayal. What was one more violation of trust? I unlocked her phone with the same pin she'd used for years and started scrolling through her messages again. And there it was, more undeniable evidence. Messages with that same coworker dating back months, far longer than she'd originally let on. "I can't wait to see you again," one text read. "I wish I were waking up next to you," said another. A rush of rage surged through me, instant and overwhelming. This wasn't a mere one-time mistake. No, this was a full-fledged affair, complete with emotions and future plans. She had been leading a double life, deceiving me day in and day out. When Maya came back to retrieve her phone, I handed it to her silently, masking the storm brewing inside me. She had no idea I'd seen everything. But the knowledge burned within me, gnawing at the last fragments of trust one had left. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed time to process, to devise my next move. Therapy had already started to feel like a farce. But now it was crystal clear that Maya's attempts to fix things were just another act. That night, lying next to her in bed, the weight of it all felt crushing. I stared at the ceiling, grappling with how I had arrived here. With a wife I couldn't trust and a marriage that felt more like a prison sentence. Yet, in the midst of that despair, there was one flicker of hope. Tara. Somehow, talking to her made the anger a bit more manageable. She wasn't just another therapist doling out tired platitudes. She actually saw me, and that realization was perilous. In a room filled with deception, Tara's attention felt like the only thing that was real. As the sessions progressed, a subtle shift began to occur between Tara and me. It wasn't overt at first, just a glance that lingered slightly too long, a smile that seemed a bit too warm. But it was there, simmering beneath the surface in those quiet moments, as her questions began to feel less like therapeutic inquiries and more like genuine curiosity. She didn't just ask about my struggles with Maya. She delved into my own aspirations, what made me feel alive, what frightened me. And, God help me, it felt exhilarating. For the first time in years, someone was genuinely interested in me. Not out of obligation, not because we were married or because she was required to. Simply because she wanted to. Every time I left her office, I felt lighter, as if I had cast off some of the burdens weighing me down. But that sense of relief vanished the moment I returned home. Maya, of course, picked up on my change in demeanor. She wasn't oblivious. I was clearly distancing myself, and she was aware of it. One evening, she made an effort to set up a romantic atmosphere. Candles, wine, even some lingerie I hadn't seen in ages. While I nursed my whiskey, she flitted around the kitchen, giving me that look, the one that used to ignite my passion. "Let's try," she whispered, her hand gently grazing my arm. "I missus, Derek." Her voice was soft and enticing, as if she were attempting to summon some long-lost magic between us. But that magic was gone. Whatever connection we once had was buried beneath layers of lies and betrayal. At that moment, she could have been anyone standing there, and it wouldn't have made a difference. I went through the motions that night, but it felt robotic, like I was checking off a to-do list. Even while she kissed me, all I could think about was Tara. Her voice, her probing questions, her eyes that seemed to peel away every falsehood I'd constructed. I recognized that it was unfair to feel this way, but fairness had become irrelevant the moment Maya decided to cheat. Before long, Tara suggested we grab coffee after one of our sessions. She brought it up nonchalantly, as if it were no big deal. "I know a great spot down the street," she said, her disarming smile making my heart skip a beat. "Just coffee if you have the time." I hesitated. I knew it wasn't just coffee, not really, but the idea of sitting across from her outside the sterile office, away from the suffocating reality of my marriage, was too tempting to resist. So I agreed. The coffee shop was cozy, nestled in a quiet corner of the street. It had an intimate feel, where patrons spoke in hushed tones, as if the walls themselves were privy to their secrets. Tara and I found a table near the window, and for the first time in ages, I felt like I could finally breathe. We chatted for what felt like hours, not about therapy or Maya, just life, relationships, and how people sometimes cling to marriages long after love has faded because starting over seems too daunting. "People get comfortable," Tara remarked, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "They confuse routine with love. But comfort doesn't equal happiness." Her words struck home, and I nodded before I realized it. "Yeah," I said quietly. "You hang on, thinking things will eventually improve. But they don't. They just drag on." As she reached for her cup, her hand brushed against mine, sending a jolt through me, igniting every nerve ending. In that moment, I understood that something was shifting between us, something irreversible. When she smiled, it wasn't the polite smile of a therapist. It was different, softer, more intimate, and I knew I was in deep trouble. At home, Maya sensed I was slipping further away. She kept making attempts, small gestures, forced smiles, suggesting we watch our old favorite shows together. But everything felt empty. I was present in body, but emotionally, I was a million miles away. I didn't even try to conceal it. One night, she finally lost her patience. "Where are you, Derek?" she demanded, her voice laced with frustration. "You're here, but you're not really here. What's going on?" I shrugged, too exhausted to explain. "Maybe I just need some space." "Space?" she repeated incredulously, her eyes narrowing. "Seriously, Derek? You think I'm the only one who messed up? You've completely checked out. You think I don't notice?" I remained silent. What was the point of responding? She was right, but I wasn't about to admit it. Not to her. The next day, I met up with Landon for drinks. He could see something was off right away. "You're in deep, aren't you?" he said, raising an eyebrow. I didn't bother pretending. "It's not like that," I muttered. "We're just talking. She gets me." Landon snorted, shaking his head. "You're playing with fire, man. Getting involved with a therapist? That's her job, to make you feel important. That's the whole point. She listens because she has to." His words hit me harder than I was willing to admit, but by then, it didn't matter. I was already too far in. "Just be careful," Landon cautioned. "This isn't going to end well." I nodded, but his warning slid off me like water off a duck's back. He didn't get it. Tara was more than just another therapist ticking off boxes. She was something special. At least, that's what I told myself to ease the growing tension inside. By the time I met Tara again, the boundaries between our professional and personal lives had become dangerously blurred. The memory of her touch still lingered on my skin, and every conversation felt like a thread pulling me further away from the wreckage of my marriage. Deep down, I realized I didn't want to let go. Everything came to a head during one of those sessions where the air felt thick with unspoken words. I wasn't sure what pushed us over the edge. Maybe it was the way Tara looked at me that day, her gaze piercing through the facade I had carefully constructed. Or perhaps it was the silence that hung between her questions, feeling more intimate than any words could convey. We were seated as usual, but something had changed. I noticed it first in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, maybe even fear, before she carefully closed her notebook and set it aside. "I need to share something," Tara said, her voice softer than normal. "This isn't easy for me." She folded her hands in her lap, taking a measured breath. "I know I'm supposed to maintain professionalism, but I can't keep pretending." I leaned forward, my heart racing. "Pretending what?" Her eyes locked onto mine, and the air between us crackled with intensity. "I'm attracted to you, Derek," she confessed, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "And I know I shouldn't say this, but I felt you needed to know. You can't tell anyone, not even Maya." The room fell silent, and all I could hear was the rapid thump of my heart. I understood we were crossing a forbidden line, but hearing those words from her felt like confirmation that I wasn't imagining the undeniable chemistry between us. "Why me?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because you're genuine," she said softly. "Because I see you, Derek, and I don't think anyone else truly does." I was fully aware of the danger. I knew this could spiral out of control in ways I couldn't begin to fathom. But in that moment, I didn't care. I needed her like a man lost at sea needs air. I craved the feeling of being desired again. What began as fleeting glances and tentative touches quickly escalated. Before long, we shed all pretense. After one session, instead of heading home, we found ourselves at her apartment. Her place was small yet inviting. Candles flickered softly on the coffee table, and soothing music floated through the air. But I barely noticed any of it. The instant the door closed behind us, it felt as if the world outside faded away, and we were free from all constraints. She initiated the kiss, tentative at first, then filled with urgency, as if she had been waiting for this moment as long as I had. Before I could overthink it, we were in her bedroom, shedding clothes like they were shackles. It was chaotic and reckless, everything it shouldn't have been, but in the whirlwind of it all, I felt more alive than I had in ages. Afterward, we lay in the dark, her head resting against my chest, our breaths gradually sinking. A wave of relief washed over me, a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was more than just physical. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself. And, God, it felt exhilarating. For the first time since stumbling upon those messages on Maya's phone, I didn't feel powerless. I had taken back something, even if it was morally ambiguous. Beyond the thrill of revenge, there was a deep connection with Tara, something that transcended mere attraction. With her, I didn't have to pretend. I could just be, and that was more than enough. After that first night together, our encounters evolved into a routine. We met after work at her apartment, finding solace in each other's embrace. Every kiss, every touch became an escape from the burdens of my crumbling marriage. With Tara, I wasn't just Derek the husband or Derek the victim. I was something else entirely, something liberated. At home, I started to test the waters with Maya, casually dropping hints about my new friend, and keenly observing her reactions for any signs of jealousy. Tara suggested that I'd mention casually during dinner, watching her face for even the faintest flicker of discomfort. But Maya never took the bait. If she suspected anything, she buried it deep beneath her usual facade. She played the same emotionally distant game she always had, and that only deepened my resentment. I loathed how little she seemed to care. Even after everything that had happened, after her admission of infidelity, she still wore that mask of indifference like a shield. One night, as we lay in bed, Maya turned to me and said, "I feel like you're hiding something." I smiled in the dark, a grin she couldn't see. "What makes you say that?" She let out a frustrated sigh but didn't push further. She knew how to keep her cards close, but I had become an expert at that too. Meanwhile, Tara was becoming more emotionally invested by the day. What had started as a refuge for both of us was quickly developing into something deeper for her. "Why are you still with Maya?" she asked one night, her fingertip tracing soft patterns on my chest. "It's complicated," I muttered, aware that it was a feeble excuse. "It doesn't have to be," Tara countered gently. "You deserve happiness, Derek. You deserve someone who truly sees you, someone who loves you the way you need to be loved." The intensity of her gaze made my heart ache, but it also filled me with fear. This was no longer just a casual fling. Tara wanted more, and I wasn't sure I could reciprocate. "You could leave her," Tara whispered, her words soft as if they were a secret meant only for me. "We could be together, really together." For a brief moment, I allowed myself to picture it. A life with Tara, free from the weight of my broken marriage. But that dream quickly dissipated, drowned out by the reality of what such a decision would entail. Cheating was one thing. Blowing up my entire life for someone else was a different matter altogether. "I need time," I told her, sidestepping the question as best as I could. Tara smiled, but I noticed a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "Just promise me you'll think about it," she urged, pressing a gentle kiss against my lips. I nodded, but inside, I felt a growing sense of dread. This had become something much bigger and messier than I had ever intended. I couldn't ignore the reality any longer. There was no turning back. I was aware of the risk I was taking, yet it didn't faze me. The thrill of my affair with Tara was intoxicating, dangerous, reckless, and utterly addictive. Every moment spent with her felt like reclaiming parts of myself that Maya had crushed. But deep down, I sensed the walls were closing in. Sooner or later, something was bound to break. The turning point came during one of our sessions. For reasons I couldn't quite explain, I felt compelled to provoke Maya, to see if she would react. I began talking about new beginnings and finding someone who truly understands me. My words were crafted with intention, sharp in their ambiguity. I wanted Maya to catch on. I needed her to. Maya tilted her head, narrowing her eyes as she scrutinized me. "What's that supposed to mean, Derek?" Tara shifted uncomfortably in her chair, shooting me a cautionary glance, but I ignored her. I leaned in closer, fanning the flames. "Sometimes, it's not about fixing what's broken," I said slowly, savoring the moment. "Sometimes, it's about recognizing when it's time to let go." Maya's arms crossed defensively, her expression turning icy. "And you think you've found someone who understands you?" I gave her a small, knowing smile. "Maybe." Tara cleared her throat, clearly eager to steer the conversation back on track. "We're here to focus on your relationship with Maya, Derek. Let's try to keep this productive." But it was too late. The spark of suspicion was lit in Maya, and I knew it wouldn't extinguish easily. She didn't say much for the rest of the session, but I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat. She was going to figure it out. It was just a matter of time. A few days later, Tara called me, her voice tinged with urgency. "Maya scheduled an individual session with me," she said, anxiety creeping into her tone. "She asked for it out of nowhere. I think she knows, Derek." A cold dread settled in my gut. "What did you tell her?" "I had to agree," Tara admitted. "I couldn't say no without raising suspicions. But if she starts probing, if she digs too deep..." Her voice trailed off, and I could sense the fear behind her words. This was no longer just about us. It was about her career, her reputation. One misstep could bring everything crashing down. "Derek, you can't say anything," she pleaded. "You have to promise me. If Maya asks, you must deny everything. Please." The desperation in her voice surprised me. Tara had always been so composed, so in control. But now, she sounded frightened, like someone teetering on the edge, terrified of falling. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I won't say anything, I assured her. You promise? She whispered, her voice wavering slightly. I promise, I said, but the weight of the promise hung heavily on my tongue. Yet I knew, deep down, that promises wouldn't hold much weight for long. Maya was far too clever to be misled for long, and once she uncovered the truth, chaos would erupt. It didn't take long for everything to unravel. The tension among Maya, Tara, and me had been building for weeks, and I sensed it was only a matter of time before the dam broke. I saw it in Maya's eyes during each session, the way she scrutinized Tara and me, connecting the dots of unspoken truths between us. And then it happened. During another session, Maya leaned forward, her voice sharp and low. You're sleeping with him, aren't you? The room fell into a heavy silence. Tara's face lost all color, her composure faltering for the first time. What? She stammered, trying to regain her footing, but panic was evident in her eyes. Maya's gaze remained steady, piercing. Don't act dumb, Tara. I'm not oblivious. I've seen the way you look at him. Tara opened her mouth to respond, but I cut in before she could dig herself deeper. Yes, I said coldly, my voice flat and unfeeling. We're together. The words hung in the air, heavy and unforgiving. Maya's breath hitched, and for a moment, she just stared at me, her facade crumbling under the weight of my admission. I could see the shock, the betrayal, and the dawning realization wash over her. This was the moment she had dreaded, the moment she had probably known was coming but refused to accept. You bastard, she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. I didn't flinch. I sat there, impassive, watching as the walls she had carefully constructed began to collapse. This was what she had done to me. Broken my spirit, shattered my trust. And now I was giving it back to her. Maya's fury erupted like a tempest, her voice rising as she sprang from the couch. You want to destroy everything because I made a mistake? You think this evens the score? She started pacing, her hands running through her hair in frustration. This is worse. You dragged our therapist into this. Derek. I didn't utter a single word. What could I possibly say? She wasn't wrong, but I was too far gone to care. I had wanted revenge, and now I had it. Watching her unravel, seeing her grasp the reality that her infidelity had set off a chain reaction of something even more destructive. This should have felt like justice. But it didn't. Tara sat frozen in her chair, her hands tense in her lap, panic etched across her face. She knew the storm was coming, and there was no stopping it now. Her career, her reputation, everything she had worked for was dangling by a fragile thread. Maya's voice cracked, filled with rage and desperation. You're both disgusting. She snatched her purse and stormed toward the door. We're done. Don't bother coming home tonight, Derek. With that, she slammed the door behind her, the sound echoing through the room. I remained seated, staring at the spot where she had stood just moments before. Tara stayed silent, tears gathering in her eyes. I need to go, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Without another word, she rose and exited the room, leaving me alone in the ruins of my own making. After that confrontation, Maya and I never returned to therapy. Our marriage unraveled rapidly. Papers filed, belongings packed, conversations reduced to logistical arrangements. There was no effort to reconcile, no closure, no final conversation to bring everything to a tidy conclusion. It just ended, like a fire extinguished without anyone to fan the flames. At first, I felt a surge of vindication. I had seized some power back, forced her to confront the pain she had inflicted. But that sense of satisfaction quickly faded. My connection with Tara sputtered out, just as I had anticipated. The intense passion we once shared dwindled, replaced by awkward silences and unfulfilled expectations. She wanted more, a real relationship, a future together. But all I had to offer were the shattered remnants of myself, and that wasn't enough for either of us. In the end, Tara was merely an escape, an ephemeral fix for wounds that ran much deeper. When she decided to walk away, I didn't try to change her mind. I let her go, knowing it was for the best. Now, I sit amid the aftermath, grappling with the consequences of my choices. The revenge felt good for a fleeting moment, but it came with a cost. One I didn't fully grasp until it was too late. Maya's betrayal broke me, but my own decisions shattered any hope of healing. I could have walked away with a semblance of dignity, but instead, I burned everything to the ground. And now I find myself alone. In the stillness of my empty apartment, I stare at the walls, replaying every moment in my mind. The arguments, the betrayals, the brief spark with Tara. It's all a haze of poor choices and lost chances. Maybe I thought revenge would provide closure, but it didn't. It only left me hollow, with nothing but a pile of regrets. I know I need to determine what comes next, but honestly, I'm lost. Starting over feels daunting, like trying to build a new foundation on the ashes of the old one. But maybe that's the only option I have left. All I know is this isn't the life I envisioned for myself. And now it's up to me to figure out how to move forward from here.